Stop asking and start doing. For too long, I waited for someone to tell me it was okay, to take the leap, to make the move, to build the life. Nobody came, so I had to figure out how to do it anyway. My name is Gabrielle Elizabeth, and this is the Audacity, the podcast for anyone who's done waiting for the green light that's never coming. Let's get into it. They say the neon lights are bright on Broadway. They say there's always magic in the air. Broadway. I always knew that I was Broadway bound. I knew that it was what I wanted to do since I was a very little girl. I will say that my first interest in performance started when I was probably 2 or 3 years old, because my entire family sang all of the time, whether it was in church, my brother's singing group, everywhere. Any place we could have the chance, we did it. And then I started watching all these old movies with my mother, and I fell in love with the film and TV and the theater. And then I watched West Side Story for the first time when I was 11 years old, because my brother needed to watch it for a class. And he hated it, but I caught the bug. I caught the theater bug, and I've been hooked ever since. So I studied musical theater when I was in college. I got a BA in theater, so I did everything. I was behind the scenes, so I did set design, I did costume design, makeup design, acting, but I knew that musical theater was like my avenue out, or into the industry, so to speak. And I remember having a conversation with one of my professors, and she probably will tell this story very differently, but she told me that if I wanted to seriously do acting, I shouldn't go to New York, and I shouldn't try to be on Broadway because it was too commercialized. I'm not going to say her name, but she did say that to me. And I did not listen to her. I had Audacity, and I decided to first go to Dollywood. That was my first job out of school. And then I went to Florida and worked for Disney and Universal and got my equity card. And then I moved to New York City and booked my first Broadway show in under a year. So I was very, 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 very thankful and very, very blessed and lucky to be able to do that. And that song that I opened with was one of the songs that the Drifters sang in Beautiful, the Carole King musical. But I always knew that this industry was for me, that storytelling was for me. But the part that I was always missing was the business aspect of it. But before I get to that, I do want to talk about how it felt to achieve a lifelong goal, a lifelong dream so quickly, because I was in my early 20s when this happened. I thought it was going to happen so much longer. You hear all these horror stories that you're going to go through the ringer and not be able to support yourself in New York, but that wasn't my story. My story was that I got on Broadway fairly quickly. And then I was like, okay, now what? Now what? What happens after this? And I became very sad, actually. About 6 months into my run, I was a little bit depressed. Now, that came with some personal life things as well, but I thought that achieving this dream of mine was going to bring me so much joy and so much happiness and abundance, and it didn't. And I didn't understand why. So I started asking questions to myself, like, what do I want? What else is there? What's my dream now? And I still don't know if I fully know what the dream is, but I know how I want it to feel. And I made my Broadway debut in 2017, and I am thankful to say that I will be making my Broadway debut again, or not my Broadway debut, going back to Broadway this year, in a show that I can't announce yet, but I'm just over the moon that I finally get to go back to Broadway with a different mindset, with a business mindset. I am now going to leverage this show for so much more. And I think that it's something that, as actors specifically, we don't do enough. We think, okay, we got the job, and then we're waiting for the next person to give us the next job and the next job. And I was so privileged to be in Beautiful with someone that I admire so much, and someone I have the privilege to call a friend, Douglas Lyons, who is now a Broadway playwright. He writes for film and TV. He's creating so many different shows constantly. And I remember watching him do this as a swing in Beautiful backstage. I remember watching him just work ferociously and pour himself into the work. And it was just such a great role model for me, and someone that I see as my mentor for how to navigate this space. Like I wouldn't consider myself a writer yet. Maybe that's something that I'll tap into one of these days, but I do know that I am more than just an actor. And there's nothing wrong with the fact that some people, that's all they want to do. But I know for me that I want to be multifaceted. I want to be a businesswoman. I am a businesswoman. I am my own business. And I think the sooner artists start looking at themselves in that way, the better off that we're all going to be. If we start understanding our contracts and not just relying on our agents to do that side of the work, I think it is important to have an agent or a manager that you trust that can support you, but it's a group effort. It's not just up to them. You need to know what you're signing. You need to know how much to put into your 401k, how to invest your money into other things, into the market, the S&P 500, E-Trade, all of these different places so that you can diversify yourself and have a full life. So that's why I'm starting this podcast. That's why I want to utilize this platform for a place to help people. I believe that this podcast is a place for you. If you want a place where someone's going to be honest with you, someone's going to give you business tips, acting tips, wellness tips. I love health and fitness. I love working out, and I'm running my second marathon this year. I ran New York last year and I'm running Chicago this year. And you just want a space where someone is living out loud, and you want, like, maybe you don't have that person in your day-to-day life. You're living in a town or in a space where everyone around you is living small and is trying to keep you down. My dad would always talk about crabs in a barrel, how, the analogy of if you put crabs in a barrel, you don't even have to put a lid on it because they're not going to climb out because they're constantly clawing at each other to pull the other one down. Unfortunately, a lot of people are living in those spaces in their lives right now. And so if you want someone that is actively doing the opposite, you have come to the right place. I have been married before. I got married when I was 22 years old. I'm divorced. I'm engaged again. I've been on Broadway. I'm going back to Broadway. I ran the New York City Marathon last year, and I'm running another marathon this year. I have a giant schnauzer named Winston that I love so much. I'm a stepmom. I have such a full life. And I just feel like I'm so full of so much love and joy and happiness at this point in my life and this stage in my life that I want to share it. I want to put it back out into the world and help give people permission to live a full life just like I am, to have audacity. Now look, I'm going to be honest with you. I started a podcast once before called The Period Space, where I wanted to talk about women's health. And I still do want to talk about that. And I think that this podcast is a place where I will also speak about those topics as well. But I started that podcast at a time where I was so low. I joke with my best friend because when I met her, she told me how she knew what it felt like to hit rock bottom. And I was like, I don't know what that feels like. What's that feel like? I've never been that low before. And lo and behold, I hit it. I hit rock bottom. I didn't know who I was anymore. I couldn't recognize myself. And I was doing it in private. I didn't tell my friends how sad I was. I didn't tell my mother or my father or my siblings how deeply in despair I was. And I just feel so opposite now. By the grace of God, I feel so opposite. But I started that podcast at a time where I wasn't ready to. I couldn't keep the schedule. I couldn't do it. And now I feel like I'm in a place, or I know that I'm in a place where this is my next step in life. I had this idea, well, I guess years ago, but then it came back to me last week. And I said, you know what? I'm going to start this 7 days later. And that is now, when you're listening to this, 7 days later from when I had the idea again, and I got on an AI system and like put in the idea of how to bring this podcast to fruition. And now we're doing it because we're not waiting. We're not procrastinating. We're going to start. Okay, so now let's get into the meat and potatoes of today's episode. I didn't know this until last week, but the month of April is Financial Literacy Month. Now that makes sense to me because it's also when you're supposed to file your taxes. I think tax day is April 15th. So it makes sense that all things finance fall into this month. Now, as an artist, or even if you're an entrepreneur, I feel like people within that space treat money as irregular. Just because our industry can sometimes be irregular. We treat money as something that is hard to get. And I'm in a space where I no longer want to do that. I'm not trying to earn money anymore. I'm trying to create wealth. I am creating wealth for myself in my present life and also for future generations to come. And I think that everyone can do that. I really believe that there is enough out there for everybody. I've been listening a lot to Emma Grede lately, and man, is she a powerhouse. She is the founder of Skims. She founded that with her husband. Her husband is the CEO. And she's also a founder of so many other businesses and is just such a phenomenal woman. I just bought her book and I am completely hooked. It is so inspiring and makes me feel that much more called to be a businesswoman, specifically a woman of color in the business space, which we see, but I don't feel like there's a ton of visibility there. And I am determined to help change that. I think for so long, I treated my art like a hobby. And because I was treating my art like a hobby, other people in turn treated my art like a hobby, like I'm just lucky to be there. But no, I've invested money into an education in this. I have a degree. I have life experience, work experience. There is a market value for your art. We just have to learn how to price it and how to utilize it in the proper way. We need to learn how to negotiate it. The art of negotiation, something that I am becoming a lot better at after being married to somebody in finance. I did mention my fiance works in the wealth management space, and being connected to him and learning from him has just been such a privilege. I don't think I'd be having this conversation right now if it wasn't for him. And I will forever be grateful to him for it, because we are business partners. We're business partners, we're life partners, we're lovers. So I don't just want to have a conversation about finances. I want to give you actionable tools that can benefit you today. So the tip that I'm going to give you today is, as a freelance artist, a lot of times we have a lot of 1099s. And if you have 1099s, you're not paying taxes on that until later in the year. So I suggest that you open a savings account today that is strictly for your taxes. And you put money aside into that account so that at the end of the year, when the IRS calls you and says, hey, you owe me this money, or at the beginning of the year and they're like, hey, you owe me this money, you're not pulling from your emergency fund. You're not pulling from your bank account. You're not pulling from your personal savings to pay this. You already have that money siphoned away. So let's talk about the type of guests that I will be having on this show. I am going to bring on people that did not ask for permission. I want to know the good, the bad, the ugly, the messy middles. I want people to talk about their journeys and how they decided to forge their own paths and what that brought them. I'm going to bring on artists, healers, entrepreneurs, athletes, playwrights, anybody that you can think of that's going to have a story that can help all of us to grow. I want people who looked at the status quo and said, no, thank you. So if you feel like that's you, please send me a message. You can shoot me a DM. You can email me. I have all that information down below. And let's continue this conversation. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. I'll be dropping them every Wednesday. And please share this episode with one person that needs to hear it. It is my new mission to create a community of audacious people just like you. So thank you for being here. Please leave a review. It helps more audacious people find each other. See you next Wednesday. And remember, permission is not required.